So I've got two properties I'm going to be talking about out here in St. Mary's, Colorado. It's a pretty cool little subdivision. In the video, I'm going to talk about how you can access these properties on your own. They do both have road access. I'm going to talk about the location. I'm going to talk about the subdivision, utilities, things like that. So what I'll do in this video is really break down the difference between these two properties. They're located really close to each other. And again, I'll talk about what you can do with these properties, what other neighboring properties and homeowners are doing in the area, and just talk a little bit more about that general location. So I wanted to start, let's start talking about this area. It's out here in St. Mary's, Colorado. We're just west of Denver, just west of Black Hawk, Colorado. This is kind of a cool little subdivision. You can see all these roads going through this subdivision. You've got St. Mary's Glacier Trailhead. You've got Silver Lake up here. Really a remarkable, beautiful part of the country, right? This gives you an idea of what you're walking into as a landowner out here. Moose, moose swimming across this lake. It really is cool. And then here's a hike for St. Mary's Glacier. So we're talking about world-class recreation, and that's going to be one of the biggest selling points for a property like this, and just the proximity to Denver. You've got Winter Park over here. Highway 40 up here to Granbury is a cool route too that takes you up into Rocky Mountain National Park. So I think there's a lot to like on this land investment. Now let's dive into the nitty gritty. I want to talk about this one first. The one we have listed for $29,000. It does have utilities available to it. I'll get talking about this $11,000 listing here towards the end of the video. I'm also going to walk you through Zillow, look at some comparable listings, and again teach you how to go view this type of property. So first of all, looking at these photos, I want to kick off this video with a quick disclaimer. This is not legal advice. This is not real estate advice. I'm simply sharing my thoughts and opinions here with you today through my own due diligence and my 10 plus years of experience in the land industry. Looking through some of these photos, our photographer did a really, really great job of helping you understand what you're going to be buying out here. These photos were taken during the winter too. It is fairly steep next to the road. There will be some excavation work that needs to be done, but you will have awesome views. And this is the mountains in Colorado. This is the Rocky Mountains. I'll show you some neighboring properties that have had success building on this side of the road because there are neighboring properties just along this road with the same topography and the same type of property that have built. So I truly do think this is a buildable land investment. You're putting kind of a switchback driveway up into your home site, and then you've got a pretty gentle slope once you get off that road. So we're talking about land in Colorado. Call an excavator, call a driveway guy, call a builder. There's going to be plenty of guys who are willing to work on this and can put a driveway into your property. Actually, the guy next door did right here. So this is a design like you would be doing, right? Your driveway comes in at an angle like this, and it loops back around, and there's your house, right? So this guy has a really good example, and we can look at that on satellite imagery. So the neighbor next door with the exact same roadway was able to build, right? That gives you a really good sign of what you're looking at there. And you will have views. You're not one of these properties tucked. So if you own property lower elevation down here, you're kind of in the bowl. You don't have the views. You do have views from this property. And, looking at our photographer, you can see those long range views are going to be really, really nice. And I think that's a huge selling point if you're looking to build a cabin back here. Let's talk about this location. Let's talk about what the neighbor did on his property, just to help you understand this. So if we zoom in, this is our property right here. We're advertising 1/3 of an acre. Whoops. Let's get back to this. So, right, we're talking about this piece of land right here that we own, right? Highlighted just like this. Here's the neighboring property, almost identical. And I just want you to be able to see how this was developed. And then this property again, just to the south of here. Again, you're making your driveways. These are steep properties on the side of the road here. But this is Colorado. This is Rocky Mountain living. That's what you're gonna get. That's what you're gonna deal with if you want views, elevation, and slope in Colorado with long range views. Okay, so we have almost an identical property to this one. Again, you can see how this driveway was put in just like that off that main road, and they have a pretty cool viewpoint actually looking out this way. So you've got some really nice peaks looking this way. And we can even see that in the photos here that the photographer took. One of these long range views from the property I thought was really nice right here. Your property's down here. You're gonna really have, I think, a clean view looking out that way, the opposite way of St. Mary's Glacier there. This looks like it's almost from the ground level right here with that view. Talking about utilities in this property. So, go through our listing. We talked about location. I wanted to just jump right into the slope of the property. That's going to be a big question for folks. Hey, is this possible? I believe it is, right? Why do I believe it is? Showing you the neighboring properties who have been able to develop on those pieces of land. I think that's a really, really strong indicator. And then behind your property, you've got 155,000 acres of Arapahoe National Forest. So your neighbor behind you is the National Forest. I think that's a really, really huge selling point. A lot of these properties inside here, their neighbors are other neighbors, right? So if you bought a property inside of here, I mean, you're surrounded by private landowners. Being on this side of the road here, your backyard is 150,000 acres of the National Forest. Again, a big selling point for this first property that I'm going to be talking about. You can read through our description here. I do think we have a really strong price. At the end of this video, I'm going to go through some comparable sales, talk about our business a little bit more. So if you want to stick around, I'll talk about the market and some of these comparable sales that we can see out here. In terms of land use, I mean, this is a residential property. You can actually clear your property and camp up to 14 days. And then with a camping permit, you can camp up to 30 days per year, right? So some people are using these properties just for camping. A property like this one, you're probably buying it to build a little cabin, some sort of tiny home, something of that nature. I want to talk about the utilities now. There's power right along that street. Your neighbors have power. I believe there's power lines running right down this street. So power is right there. That would be the least of my concerns. St. Mary's Glacial Water District serves the property, and the sanitary district serves the property. So you do have access to connect to St. Mary's Glacier Water and Sanitation District, right? You don't need to put a well and a septic in. You do have all of your utilities available through St. Mary's Glacier Water and Sanitation District, okay? Those are some really meaty questions. That's the meat and potatoes of this listing. For those of you looking to develop or view the property, let's start with viewing the property. I would use these GPS coordinates. My favorite app is Onyx Maps. You guys saw me using that at the beginning of the video. It's going to bring you right up to this property. And if you don't know how to use Onyx Maps, just simply plug these coordinates in. It should bring you right in front of the property, and you should be able to see this house next door and understand that, their driveway is kind of at the corner of this lot. And then, it travels roughly in width. Our property travels in width about 50 yards, so half a football field if you can conceptualize that, okay? Okay, so let's talk about a little bit more in depth about this area. I've got a folder that our sales team can send you if you're interested in this. This subdivision, St. Mary's Glacier, has guidelines for building, right? You can contact the sanitation district. These are really great resources for those of you looking to develop and build. You can read through these documents, have ChatGPT summarize it, things like that. All that good stuff. They probably have a lot of good recommendations for builders and excavation work, things like that. So here's a water and sanitation district document. That's a really old one. I mean, my starting point would be this recent document that they put together for St. Mary's Winterland subdivision here. Here's a plat of the area. Probably doesn't matter a lot to you right now. That's just what we looked at on Onyx Maps. You saw a plat. Here's the covenants for the area. Very light covenants. It's not even a full page. Or here's the amended covenants. I'll add the full document of covenants here. I don't know if those have all been removed, but again, you can plug those things into like ChatGPT, and you can go through these covenants, and have it summarize that, right? So basically, it's saying there's some building. They want it more than 600 square feet, only new construction, yada yada yada. They're saying, hey, you can't live out of a camper. These are really short covenants. No billboards. That's this line right here. So I'll let our buyers look through this. If you want it, let me know. But yeah, I mean, these are very, very minimal and light covenants. So take a peek at that. The end goal of the properties out here, you can see people are building cabins. I mean, if that's what you're in the market for, is building some sort of cabin, this is a great property for you. And maybe you want to use it in the meantime to camp, or maybe you view this as a really good long-term land investment near Denver. Wilco Land is in the business of selling land fast. We want to offer the best prices on the market, and we want our next buyer to have some meat on the bone with their purchase. So whether you're looking for a long-term land investment, contact us. We do offer cash discounts to cash buyers. We can offer some seller financing. Maybe it's someplace you want to camp for a couple weeks of the year until you're ready to build. There's a lot of tangible use to a property in a location like this. It gives you access to the St. Mary's Glacial Lakes area with being a landowner, right? It gives you access to Silver Lake. It gives you access to the trailhead. It gives you a place to spend the weekends and camp until you are ready to move forward with a building or development. And also, this is a tangible, real land investment, just like a stock in the stock market. It's going to go up over time. United States real estate always has. So we get a lot of buyers here who are just looking for a good land investment. We find a price that might work for both sides. They feel like they're getting value on their end. Other times we have people that this is their dream investment. This is something they want to build on, something they want to camp on in the future. So again, I wanted to just click around. You can see all these cabins out here. That's what folks are doing. They're building small cabins, some of them bigger than others, right? But folks are putting cabins out here and they're recreating. They're spending their weekends out here. These are family kind of legacy assets is what I consider these. So the next property I want to talk through, right? This is our buildable property. This has utilities available to it. We've got a lot of good resources for buyers here. Talking about the covenants, talking about the guidelines for buildings, things like that. I think those are all really great resources for a buyer, right? And we can send those to you. What I'll probably do is even link this in the listing for folks to look at. The next property I want to talk about is in the same subdivision, but it's a little bit different because the subdivision has not extended utilities yet to this development or to this area in the subdivision. So the main target audience of this property, and it reflects in the price, is you're going to be buying this for a long-term land investment. Maybe in 10, 20 years, they have utilities that have run up here that you can hook up to power, water, sewer. You can build your cabin up here. And in the meantime, the other target audience is for $10,000, you can go camp for up to 30 days a year on this property in a world-class location, right? And so I think there's a lot of value to properties like this. We have a lot of people that actually do end up buying, properties like this. The other thing I want to mention is that this Unit 3 doesn't have any of those covenants. To our knowledge, they don't have any of those covenants. So this Unit 3 is undeveloped. Supposedly it's not part of the covenants. Have your buyer verify that, but it is Unit 3, Lot 481. So they probably created Unit 1, Unit 2, and now they're at Unit 3. The developers never ran utilities up to these properties. It sits about 1,100 feet away from water and sewer lines. Right now, there's no plans to extend these lines. Homeowners and developers can extend them on their own cost. It's a long-term investment, right? What you're looking to do is camping, tree forts, yurts, things like that. Like I said, there's a lot of value to being in these locations and owning these long-term land investments. We see a lot of people doing that. And here's some of these photos again, showing the property, a little higher elevation. You can see there's some snow up there. Road access isn't quite as good. When it comes to camping, I don't know who's finding you up here to check how many days a year you're doing it, and I don't know if that 14 or 30 days off the top of my head is from the HOA or the subdivision, or if it's from the county. You'll have to verify a few of those things. So taking a peek here, this is what this property looks like. A little bit bigger, fairly steep, but again, I think there's a nice little bench up here on top of the property. I think it'd be a cool campsite. Somebody has actually built back here, which I find really interesting. So maybe you can build, since it's not part of the HOA, since those guidelines don't exist for Unit 3, somebody's been able to build like this. I find extremely interesting, this type of property. So like either they renegated that or they went through the county and they have some sort of structure. Maybe they put a structure that doesn't require a permit. So like some counties say under 300 square feet, you can put a tiny home, you can put a yurt, you can put something temporary without a foundation, without a septic system, without a well, and you can have a dry cabin, you can have a yurt. So that is actually a really cool idea, and a lot of people are doing those type of things, right? People are finding ways to get around zoning and stuff like that to essentially, use these properties in an unconventional way. Here's another person that built up here. Man, it's hard to believe, we're 1,100 feet from power and this person developed like that. So, we are seeing some people that have worked this, and then you've got this little hiking trail right outside your front doorstep that brings you to Arapahoe National Forest. I thought that was kind of cool too. So, they're going to be two different type of properties. The user for this second property that I'm talking about right here is going to buy a recreational property with a lot of long-term, upside to it. You're going to buy it at a really low price. Where are you finding real estate in Colorado for 10, 11, 12,000 bucks, right? The buyer of this property doesn't want to play games. They know what they want. They either want this type of really solid land investment they can build on someday, or they're ready to start breaking ground one of these years and start developing. So this is a really straightforward land investment. Everything's ready for you to set up and build. I think the second property, like I said, according to the title company, the CC&Rs or the covenants that we talked about in this folder supposedly don't apply to Unit 3, which would be this property. So maybe there is more freedom to create tiny homes, yurts, dry cabins, maybe just a pole barn where you're parking and you've got coverage and stuff like that. So maybe a little bit of excavation work goes a long way on a property like this. I've been doing this over a decade, and you'd be surprised how many creative ways people are using land these days, finding ways to do things under 300 square feet, 200 square feet, whatever that county code may be, to get some sort of fun little structure, maybe a wood-burning stove, a place to spend your weekends, a place to spend your summer months, things like that. Especially at the price point we're offering, you're not seeing a lot of these prices these days. So let's talk about the comparable sales. Again, if you want to view this property, simply use the GPS coordinates, plug them right into Onyx Maps here. And then again, you can zoom in, you can view the property. It does abut two roads. So keep that in mind. You do have access, it looks like, maybe to two roads here. So right here, you could access the property, and also up top. There is some slope. I think there's a nice little bench right here on the property though. You could walk up into, excavate a little area on the side of the road for parking, things like that. So that's what that one looks like. Let's talk about this market. So this is the St. Mary's Glacial area. You can see homes for sale and stuff like that. I think we should filter it down to maybe just land here and understand that. There's quite a bit of land for sale all over the map. Here's a $40,000 listing that's basically across the road from the first one I showed you. And this one's pretty steep. And again, instead of going up the hill, right, like our listing, we're on this side of the road, on Mine Road on the right side. Maybe it's your left side, but we're on this side of the road. This one's down on this side of the road. So you're in the shadows, you're in the shade, right? You don't have those views. I do think there's a lot of value, and we're $10,000 less in this listing, by the way. So like I said, we are in the market of moving land fast. How do you do that? You have to have an attractive price. You have to help your buyers understand what they're looking at. So if you do have questions, give us a call, right? But I do think this side of Mine Road, this is where we're at basically on Mine Road, our property, somewhere in here. You're adjacent to Arapahoe National Forest. This property is surrounded by private land. This is all private land ownership and cabins. Nobody can build behind you on that first property I'd mentioned, that buildable lot we have back here. It's very limited, right, to what can be done around you. There's not a lot of space. So, and I want to point out there's other listings going for 50 grand, right? And you'd have to dive into each listing to understand really what you're getting. But I do think our price of $29,000 is fair. If you see a lower listing in this market that offers what we offer, has the utilities available to it, is the same asset class, I'm happy to match that price. So, you see this one for $29,000. I mean, personally, I think our one is better than this. You see this one surrounded by, private land ownership, I guess. Right? This again is surrounded by private land ownership. I do think there's a lot of value being next to the National Forest and being up top like that with those views that we showed you at the beginning of this video. I think there's a lot of value to that, but I think I'd match this price if you're interested in that. So something to keep in mind. Let's talk about this other area way at the top of the hill. We're on Hilltop Road. Remember that last property we just looked at, that recreational property? We're up here at the top of the subdivision in Unit 3. I mean, check this out. The cheapest listing up here in Unit 3 is 20 grand. It's got 30 saves on Zillow in less than 90 days. They don't mention anything about CC&Rs and all that good stuff either. So, they're mentioning building a cabin, year-round neighborhood. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe there is utilities up at the top of this road, right? Because, people are saying that. Third of an acre. I mean, 16. So, it is one of those things where I don't know. Maybe you could call the HOA and ask them more about this Hilltop Road and see what our property looks like. Maybe we're underselling that property significantly looking at these comps. I don't know. We're in the business of moving land. I'm probably going to make a few calls after this video and maybe update our listing as well to see what I can understand. But it doesn't hurt making those calls to this HOA, right? Calling some of these parties down here. You might get a lot of insight to talking to some of those locals, understanding that a little bit better. And kind of a secret tool is calling some of these realtors, picking their brain about the area and seeing what they know about it too. That can go a really long way for a buyer. So hopefully you found this video helpful. I've got more listings on the website, Wyoming, Colorado, places like that. I've got a 5-acre out there in Blackhawk. This one doesn't have any CC&Rs. This one's out next and surrounded by national forest as well. This one's got easy road access. If you're interested in more space, this would really be a really good land investment too. So give us a call if you have any questions. We have all of our listings on our homepage here. You can reach us at 605-299-5553. Thanks for tuning in.